Tell the boys to keep rolling. His trail's my parking lot as of tonight.
Bryony Ashford said that into her phone with her left hand, as her right hand held a glass of champagne at the grand opening of her HOA's brand new asphalt path. 1,000 feet of black pavement laid across a 230-year-old colonial horse trail while I was 3 states away at a heritage conference. Behind her, a yellow excavator was still idling over a pile of broken stone mile markers her crew had chainsaw snapped out of the ground and tossed into a rented dumpster. My grandmother's handwriting was on one of those markers. My 15-year-old son Reese had ridden that trail every morning for 9 years. She thought I was just a guy with horses. She didn't know I was Pennsylvania's state heritage officer for 3 counties. And she didn't know the trail she'd just paved had carried escaped slaves to freedom in 1849. What would you have done? And where are you watching from tonight? My name is Silas Whitmore. I'm 51 years old. I live on a 28-acre farm in the rolling part of Chester County, Pennsylvania. And for 19 years, I've worked for the state as a historic preservation officer. My district covers Chester, Lancaster, and Berks counties. Old Quaker farm country, covered bridges, stone walls laid in 1732. I walk other people's property for a living, figuring out what deserves protection. I never expected to need to protect my own. The farm came to me from my grandmother, Ruth Whitmore, who spent the last 15 years of her life quietly entering Pennsylvania back roads onto the state's inventory of historic trails. Her handwriting is on hundreds of registry forms at the state archives. She died in 2009, holding my hand. She left me the farm, her riding boots, and a Morgan mare named Atlas she had rescued from a police auction the year before. Atlas is a chestnut, 15-2 hands, scar on her right fetlock from her patrol days, the most patient horse I have ever known. My son rides her every morning at 7. My son's name is Reese. He's 15 this month. He has autism, high-functioning, verbal, steady, brave, and absolutely dependent on routine to feel safe in the world. When his mother Naomi passed 4 years ago from breast cancer, he stopped talking for 9 weeks. The first thing that brought him back was Atlas. Every morning, rain or snow, Reese rode Atlas down the old horse trail behind our south pasture. 900 feet of dirt and leaf mold path, worn into a shallow groove by 2 centuries of hooves, lined with hand-set stone mile markers that were placed there in the 1790s, when this road was a colonial post route between Lancaster and Philadelphia. Grandma had registered the trail federally under the National Trails System Act in 2004. She had also, quietly, helped document a second layer of its history, which I'll come back to later. That trail was Reese's daily medicine. On the north side of our back pasture, a luxury subdivision called Hunt Club Meadows had gone up in 2013. 180 colonial-style McMansions around a stocked pond and a clubhouse that served brunch. For 11 years, the relationship between the farm and the subdivision had been unremarkable. Kids waved at Reese on his horse. Walkers asked politely if they could stroll down the trail. I said yes, quietly, because heritage access was part of my work, and I'd rather say yes than be a man who said no. Then, 2 years ago, Bryony Ashford and her husband Lionel bought the biggest house in Hunt Club Meadows, and Bryony ran unopposed for HOA president on a platform called Hunt Club Forward. I met her twice. The first time, in line at the Unionville Farmers Market, she told me my fence needed painting. The second time, at the Chester County Equestrian Council fundraiser, she told me Hunt Club Meadows was considering activating the trail as a community asset. I told her, politely, that the trail was private, federally listed, and that any alteration would require state and federal consultation. She smiled the small, tight smile of a woman who has just decided she doesn't like you. In early October, I flew to Savannah for the National Preservation Officers Conference. Reese went to stay with his Aunt Willa for the week, the first time he'd slept away from me in 4 years. He was anxious but proud. He told me he'd written a short essay for school titled, "My Horse and My Trail." I kissed his forehead at the airport and told him I'd be back Friday. I came home on Friday evening, at dusk, into a world I didn't recognize. The driveway lights were on. Good. The porch light was off. Strange. I rolled down my window as I turned the last bend of our gravel drive, and on the wind, I caught a smell I did not expect. Hot asphalt. The sharp petroleum sting of a freshly laid driveway at a hotel. Here, on my farm. I killed the headlights and coasted the last 100 feet. The back pasture lights, which I had never installed, were glaring across my south field. I could see, clearly, a new black asphalt strip running the length of the trail behind the Hunt Club Meadows property line. I estimated, without meaning to, 1,100 feet of paved surface, 10 feet wide, fresh enough that it still glistened under moisture. Where the southern mile marker should have stood, the 1797 stone that my grandmother had personally recorded with the state, there was only dirt. Bare, churned dirt, and a yellow excavator parked 10 feet past my property line. I did not get out of the truck immediately. I sat in the cab with both hands on the wheel. My chest did a slow, familiar, completely unhelpful thing. It was the same sensation I'd had in the hospital parking lot the day Naomi died, 4 Novembers ago. My phone rang. It was Aunt Willa, Reese's voice in the background asking for me. "Silas, are you home? I'm sorry, I couldn't hold him any longer. He wanted to come home tonight. Is Friday still okay?" "Yes, Friday is still okay. Can you keep him one more night?" A pause. "Is everything all right?" "No." She did not ask. She said, "I'll tell him you had a late work thing. See you in the morning." I hung up. I got out of the truck. I walked, carefully, to the beginning of the asphalt strip. I knelt. I touched the surface. Warm, not set yet, poured within the last 12 hours. Then I walked 300 yards through the field to the Hunt Club Meadows clubhouse, where a string of little white lights was blinking over the patio, and where I could already hear laughter. Bryony Ashford was in the center of the patio, in a cream wool coat, holding a champagne flute. Behind her, an oversized banner read, "Hunt Club Meadows Community Connector, Grand Opening." Her husband Lionel, bald and florid, stood beside her in a navy blazer with a pocket square. Maybe 30 residents milled around. A caterer was pouring Prosecco out of a silver ice bucket. I walked into the light. The conversation dipped. Bryony turned. "Oh, Mr. Whitmore, you're back early. Mrs. Ashford, who authorized the paving of that trail?" "The board did." She lifted her glass slightly. "Unanimous. We moved it up while you were away, as a courtesy. You seem to have strong feelings about trail business. We didn't want to burden you. That trail is my private property. It is federally registered. You have committed, I am choosing my words carefully, a documented crime." A couple of guests took a step back. Bryony smiled. "Mr. Whitmore, it's done now. The ribbon has already been cut. Let's be grown-ups about it and talk Monday, after everyone's had their coffee." "We will talk Monday, through attorneys, and through the Commonwealth." Lionel spoke for the first time. "Let's not get dramatic, neighbor. I have a few friends at the county. We can straighten this out cheap." I looked at him for 4 full seconds. Then I turned and walked back through the dark to my truck. Halfway there, I realized I was still holding my conference badge lanyard, which I had not yet taken off. National Preservation Officers Conference. Silas Whitmore, State Heritage Officer, Pennsylvania. I wondered if anyone at the Hunt Club Meadows party had actually read it before. Back at the house, I did not eat. I did not shower. I sat at my grandmother's oak desk, opened a fresh manila folder, labeled it Case, and began working. By 2 a.m., I had printed time-stamped drone photographs of the destruction, pulled the 2004 federal trail listing, emailed Trooper Delaney Fox of the Pennsylvania State Police Heritage Crimes Unit, and drafted the first of what would become 17 different formal notices. I filed a preliminary notice of violation under Pennsylvania History Code Title 37, Section 507, before dawn. The fine under that statute starts at $25,000 per day, per resource destroyed, and accrues continuously. I pressed send. I watched the sun come up over the ruined trail through my kitchen window. Atlas, in the far pasture, lifted her head and looked toward me, slowly, the way she used to when Naomi called her in. I walked out and told her, out loud, "It'll be all right, girl. We'll put it right." She believed me. She always did. Saturday morning, I drove to Aunt Willa's. Reese came out of the house in his riding boots already, carrying a manila folder of his own, the essay he'd written about the trail, neatly typed, a grade of A+ at the top. He hugged me, briefly, the way he only hugs when something has already clicked in him that something is wrong. "Dad?" "Yeah, bud. Is Atlas okay?" "Atlas is fine. The trail is not." He absorbed that. He nodded once. "Can I see it?" On the drive home, I explained as carefully as I could what pavement was, what Bryony had done, what state law said, and what the process from here would be. Reese listened without interrupting, his hands folded on top of his essay folder, the way he folds them when he is processing hard. When we reached the south pasture, He asked me to stop the truck 20 feet from the edge of the asphalt. He got out. He walked, slowly, to the place where the 1,797-mile marker had stood. He crouched. He put his hand flat on the dirt. He did not cry right away. He cried the slow way, the way he had cried the afternoon of Naomi's funeral, shoulders completely still, tears just dropping off his chin onto his knees. I sat down beside him and put my hand between his shoulder blades and waited. After about 6 minutes, he said, "Dad, I know we can fix the stones, but the feeling of it, the feeling of riding down it in the morning when it was still soft, that's broken."
I hear you, bud. Are they going to do it to more?
No, not 1 inch more. We sat there another minute. Then I heard a car engine on the subdivision side of the property line. A white BMW pulled up along the new pavement. Bryony Ashford stepped out in athleisure and approached with a bright professional smile. "Mr. Whitmore, I thought we agreed on Monday." "I'm not here to talk, Mrs. Ashford. I'm here with my son." She looked at Reese for the first time. Her smile didn't change. "Oh, this must be your special son." The word special came out of her mouth the way a real estate agent says it about a house with bad plumbing. Mrs. Ashford, step back. "I'm just saying, sir, we have an open house in 40 minutes. If he could just not make a scene here, that would be helpful for the community." Reese stood up. His face was calm. His voice was not. "You destroyed my trail." "Honey, it's a community trail now." "It is not a community trail. It was registered with the Commonwealth on September 4th, 2004, under PA Title 37, Section 308. I have the registration number memorized. Do you want to hear it?" Bryony blinked. My son, who needed routine to feel safe, who had taught himself the registration numbers of every historic resource on the farm because it gave him comfort to know them, recited the registration number to her, clearly, in full, and then walked back to the truck. Bryony looked at me. I said nothing. I got up, got in the truck, and drove home. Sunday night, at 11:12 p.m., a glass bottle came through our front living room window. The motion camera caught a black Chevy Silverado fishtailing down our driveway. License plate, visible. Driver, visible. Passenger, visible and laughing. I recognized the driver immediately. He was the son of a friend of Lionel Ashford, a boy named Denton Rowe, who had already been cited twice this year for underage drinking. The passenger was an 18-year-old from the same crowd. A knowledge nugget worth saving. Most home security cameras now record continuously to cloud storage and are admissible evidence in every state. If you have a dispute with neighbors, the single best investment you can make is a $180 cloud camera on the eve of your porch. By Monday morning, Trooper Delaney Fox was sitting at my kitchen table with a coffee, taking Reese's statement about the broken window in a way so gentle that Reese actually laughed once. It was the first laugh I had heard from him in 3 days. After the trooper left, Reese turned to me with that absolutely flat expression he gets when he has made a decision. "Dad, I'd like to help you fight this." "I know you would, bud." I looked at my son. I saw Naomi in him, and I saw my grandmother, and I saw, for just a second, a version of the man he was going to become. "Okay, Reese, we'll fight this together." Monday afternoon, I drove to the Chester County Courthouse to file the formal heritage violation in person. The clerk was a woman I had known professionally for 8 years. She stamped my paperwork, gave me a receipt, and wrote, quietly, on a post-it next to the filing fee stub, "Good luck. Terrence is tangled with them." Commissioner Terrence Hollister, County Commissioner, Chairman of the Chester County Code Enforcement Oversight Board, and, a phone call to a colleague, confirmed by Tuesday, a recent golf partner of Lionel Ashford at the Chester Valley Country Club. By Wednesday, my complaint had been assigned for review by the county code officer, and the review had been immediately paused pending administrative determination. Pennsylvania has a clean procedure for situations like this. I knew the procedure because I had, twice in my career, advised other landowners to use it. I filed a formal written recusal demand against Commissioner Hollister, copy to the Pennsylvania Ethics Commission, copy to the Office of Open Records, copy to the Commonwealth's Inspector General. I attached golf club membership photographs I pulled off the club's public Instagram. A knowledge nugget worth pinning. In most states, public officials who accept gifts or benefits from parties they regulate must either recuse themselves or disclose. Filing a written recusal demand with documentation is something you do not need an attorney for. The forms are free. the officials know. 10 business days for the Ethics Commission to respond. Meanwhile, I needed to keep my own pipeline moving. I called my state office and did a small but important thing. I told my supervisor, Director Phoebe Arrington, that because the incident involved my own property, I was formally recusing myself from the case and asking her to assign it to my colleague, Senior Heritage Officer Constance Marlowe. Director Arrington had been waiting for my call. She said, "I'll assign Connie today, and Silas will back you to the wall." I drove home that evening lighter than I had been in a week. Then Bryony made her third mistake. Tuesday night she had filed, through her family attorney, a temporary restraining order against me, alleging that I had trespassed on Hunt Club Meadows property during Saturday's confrontation and had verbally intimidated the HOA president in the presence of her community. The hearing was scheduled for Thursday morning at 10. I arrived at the hearing with Nolan Redding, a lean, sharp-tongued Philadelphia land use attorney who had been my grandmother's lawyer and who had, in a previous life, successfully prosecuted a historic trust case against a sitting state senator. Nolan is 63. He wears round, horn-rimmed glasses. He never raises his voice. He does not have to. Bryony arrived with an attorney I had never heard of, Trent Blackwood, her husband's corporate transactions lawyer, who had clearly never set foot in a county civil court before. Wrong tie, wrong briefcase, wrong county. Nolan opened by submitting two pieces of evidence. First, my conference check-in record from Savannah, which placed me 430 miles away at the exact time Bryony claimed I had verbally intimidated her. Second, the drone photograph of the paving crew on my land from the Saturday, showing me walking, legally, on my own property while she stood, hers, on mine. The judge was a retired district magistrate named Judge Lenore Catchings, who had been active in the Chester County Underground Railroad Preservation Society for 22 years. She read the filing. She looked up. She looked directly at Bryony. "Mrs. Ashford, did you pave over the Whitmore Trail?" Bryony hesitated. We, the community, authorized. "Mrs. Ashford, yes or no?" "We facilitated an upgrade." Judge Catchings closed the folder. "Motion for restraining order denied. Let's consider sanctions, Mrs. Ashford, for filing a bad faith TRO based on evidence you plainly knew was false. Mr. Blackwood, you'll want to review your client's filing prior to any further litigation in this county." Trent Blackwood turned the color of spoiled milk. Bryony stood up and walked out without looking at me. On the courthouse steps, a journalist from the Daily Local News was already waiting. Her name was Pamela Quinn. She had been tipped off about the ribbon-cutting photographs circulating on Nextdoor that morning. Nolan gave her a 3-sentence on-the-record statement. "The trail behind the Whitmore farm is federally listed. The destruction is documented. The Commonwealth will hold those responsible accountable." Pamela's story ran Friday morning. By Friday afternoon, the phrase "Hunt Club Meadows" was trending on Pennsylvania Twitter. Someone had dug up the original 1849 Underground Railroad documentation of the corridor and attached it in a single devastating thread. I ate dinner with Reese that night. He ate 3 helpings of mac and cheese. He asked me if he could name the restoration fund after his grandma. "Yes, Reese," I said. "Absolutely yes." Saturday night, after Reese went to bed, I carried a cup of chamomile tea into my grandmother's office and started opening boxes I had not opened in 15 years. Grandma Ruth had been a meticulous archivist. Her filing system was organized by resource type, by county, by registry number, and, because she was Ruth Whitmore, by color-coded index tab. The green tabs meant pending. The blue tabs meant federally listed. The red tabs meant the ones she called her quiet ones. The Whitmore Trail, our trail, had 3 tabs. Green in 1997, blue in 2004, and, at the very bottom, red, dated 2007. I had never opened the red tab. Inside was a 53-page dossier, hand-indexed, in which my grandmother, with the help of Dr. Ezra Pennington of the Pennsylvania Abolition Society archives, had documented the trail as a certified corridor on the U.S. National Park Service's Network to Freedom Program, the Federal Underground Railroad Registry. The corridor, registered in 2007, ran from a Quaker safe house in Unionville, Pennsylvania, 3 miles north through our property, on the exact alignment of the horse trail, to a second safe house at the Fairborn farm, the same Fairborn family that Miss Ada Fairborn, our neighbor down the road, descended from. The dossier cited an 1849 journal entry from Ada's great-great-grandmother, a woman named Delphine Fairborn, who had walked that trail on a March night in 1849 with her infant daughters strapped to her chest, leaving slavery behind in Maryland and reaching the Whitmore safe house at dawn. I sat back in my grandmother's chair. For a long moment, I could not breathe without my eyes burning. The takeaway, and this one is worth printing out and hanging on a wall. The National Park Service's Network to Freedom program, created in 1998, provides federal protection and grant eligibility to underground railroad sites across the United States. Destruction of a listed Network to Freedom site is a federal offense. Even a single stone marker, if it is listed as a contributing resource, falls within the protection. I also realized something else. As the state heritage officer for this district, I was the official who, under Pennsylvania statute, issues the formal state notice of historic resource destruction. The notice, once issued, triggers automatic injunction, mandatory restoration, and, my favorite, a civil penalty of $25,000 per day per resource destroyed, accruing from the moment of destruction. But I could not issue that notice myself. I was the victim. I had recused. My colleague, Constance Marlowe, could. At 2 in the morning, I called Constance at her home in Harrisburg. Constance is 67 years old, a former Episcopal priest who became a heritage lawyer in her 50s, and she has exactly zero patience for petty power. She listened. She said, "Silas, I will be at your farm by 9 tomorrow morning. Bring me the red tab." I hung up. I walked outside. The stars over Chester County were enormous. Atlas was standing at the pasture fence. I stood with her for a long time, my forehead against her warm shoulder, and I told my grandmother, out loud, that I was sorry it had taken me 15 years to open her red tab, and that I was going to finish what she started. Then I went back inside and slept for 6 straight hours for the first time in a month. Constance Marlowe arrived at 8:54 Sunday morning, in a Subaru Outback with a roll of state survey tape in the passenger seat and a Federal Network to Freedom field kit in the trunk. We walked the damaged trail together in silence. She photographed. She measured. She knelt at each place where a contributing resource had been destroyed, and she made a small note in her notebook the way a coroner takes the temperature of a body. At the place where the 1,797-mile marker had stood, she stood up and looked at me evenly. "Silas, the Commonwealth is going to bring this hammer down. You understand that?" "I understand. Stand back from the case. Stay off the phone with me about it. I will handle it publicly. You will handle your son, your horse, and your testimony when the time comes." "Yes, ma'am." We walked back up to the house. She left with the red tab, a flash drive of the drone footage, and a hug from Reese that she accepted like a woman who had done more confirmations than baptisms in her former career. Over the next 11 days, a number of things happened that did not require me to be loud. Constance Marlowe issued a formal state notice of historic resource destruction. The notice served on Bryony Ashford, Lionel Ashford, the Hunt Club Meadows HOA, and the paving contractor Gus Pemberton, triggered immediate injunction of any further work, a mandatory restoration order, and civil penalties accruing at $25,000 per day per contributing resource destroyed. 7-mile markers, plus the surface of the corridor itself, made the clock run at $200,000 per day. Trooper Delaney Fox of the Pennsylvania State Police Heritage Crimes Unit opened a concurrent criminal investigation. Dr. Ezra Pennington, now 81, traveled from Villanova to our farm with a carefully laminated binder of the 1849 primary source documents and met with Miss Ada Fairborn, our neighbor, at her kitchen table. Ada, who is 76, listened to Ezra read the name Delphine Fairborn aloud, closed her eyes, and did not open them again for a full minute. Then she said, in a low, steady voice, "I'll speak at the hearing. I'll speak at every hearing. I'll speak until this is right." The Pennsylvania Bureau of Consumer Protection suspended the paving contractor Gus Pemberton's license, pending review of his unpermitted work on a federally listed resource. Gus Pemberton, for his part, arrived at my gate the following Tuesday evening, with a hat in his hand and an apology that went about as well as an apology can go. "Mr. Whitmore, I didn't know. If I'd known, I swear to God I wouldn't have laid a yard of blacktop." I made him a cup of coffee. I told him I believed him. I asked him to sign a sworn affidavit describing exactly what Bryony had told him, which was, verbatim, that she had all permits and that the state had cleared the work. He signed it at my kitchen table. The National Park Service confirmed, in writing, that the Whitmore Trail was listed as a Network to Freedom Corridor, and that destruction constituted a federal offense under 16 U.S.C. Section 1249. An NPS special agent named Rebecca Lind reached out to coordinate with state authorities on a federal referral. Nolan Redding filed 3 civil actions in a single morning: a trespass suit, a quiet title declaratory judgment, and a civil penalty enforcement action under Pennsylvania Title 37, and referred Lionel Ashford's apparent self-dealing in the paving project to the Chester County District Attorney's Public Corruption Unit. And my neighbor, Boone Callahan, 76, retired Army Ranger, who had known my grandmother and who drank coffee strong enough to resurface a driveway, stopped by on a Wednesday evening and said, without preamble, "Silas, I'll watch the trail cameras overnight. Don't argue with me."
I did not argue with him.
Meanwhile, I spent every evening, after Reese went to bed, doing something Grandma would have called soul work. I unloaded the dumpster, by hand, 1 stone at a time, with a pair of leather gloves and a rented dolly. I recovered, in pieces, every one of the 7 original mile markers that Bryony's crew had tossed. I laid them in my barn, in rows, the way you lay soldiers who are going to come home. A takeaway worth pinning. Most states now have heritage crimes units inside their state police forces. If you own a historic property and it is damaged, you do not just call 911. You call your state's heritage crimes line. The response is faster, more knowledgeable, and in many cases, criminal. On the 9th day, Constance called me. "Silas, the hearing is Thursday in Harrisburg. Bring your son." Bryony did not go quietly. No Karen ever does. On Monday morning, a letter arrived at Director Phoebe Arrington's office from an attorney at a Philadelphia law firm, alleging that State Heritage Officer Silas Whitmore had a gross conflict of interest on a case involving his own property and demanding his termination from the Commonwealth Service. The letter was copied to the governor's office. It was also copied, helpfully, to the Associated Press. Director Arrington read the letter, set it down, and called me. "Silas, you recused 9 days ago. The formal recusal memo is in your personnel file and time-stamped. I'm going to respond today." "Yes, ma'am." Her response, dictated that afternoon, was 7 sentences long. It noted the recusal. It cited the precise section of the Commonwealth's ethics manual authorizing heritage officers to take formal action to protect their own property from third-party destruction, even while recused. It offered to provide the filing firm with a copy of the destroyed Federal Registry form so they would better understand the scope of their client's liability. It ended, politely, "Please direct any further correspondence on this matter to the Office of the Attorney General." The law firm did not write back. Bryony moved to her next move. She drafted, on Hunt Club Meadows' HOA letterhead, an emergency petition to rezone the trail corridor as community-owned common area, under a provision of the HOA's covenant she misquoted by 2 words. The petition required signatures from 25% of adjacent landowners. She got most of them. Her neighbors, frightened of litigation, signed. She did not get one. Miss Ada Fairborn, whose family had lived on the farm across the road for 7 generations, walked down her drive to Bryony's mailbox with a stamped envelope, unsigned, and a short handwritten note that said, "Mrs. Ashford, I will not sign. My family's name was on that trail before yours was on a mortgage." Bryony, apparently, did not take no as an answer. 2 days later, when the petition was filed with the county, Miss Ada Fairborn's signature was on it, forged, clumsily. The F in Fairborn was done by somebody who had never watched Ada sign a check. Ada found out when a reporter called her for comment. She called me. Her voice was perfectly level, which is how I knew how furious she was. "Silas, they signed my name." "I'm sorry, Ada. Do you have a pen?" "Yes." "Write this down. Pennsylvania Crimes Code, Title 18, Section 4101, forgery of a private document, second-degree felony, and Title 18, Section 4904, unsworn falsification to authorities." "I have it." "Would you like Trooper Fox to take your statement?" "Yes." "She'll be at your house in 40 minutes. Miss Ada hung up. I called Trooper Fox. She called me back 15 minutes later, laughing in the dry way troopers laugh when a case has just gotten much simpler. "Silas, you just handed me a felony on a platter." The same week, Reese's middle school principal, Mrs. Calloway, called me with a concerned tone I had not heard from her before. Someone had called the school that morning, posing as a parent in the community, asking pointed questions about Reese's behavioral history, his disability services, his mother's death, and his father's stability. The caller ID had been a Virginia number. Mrs. Calloway had hung up. She had then, bless her, called the state police herself before calling me.
Silas, I told them nothing, and my secretary traced the number. It's a VoIP service routed through a Maryland shell company. The billing account belongs to a Delaware LLC, whose registered agent is Ashford Real Estate Holdings. Lionel Ashford, a knowledge nugget worth keeping close. Impersonating a parent to obtain information about a child is a federal crime under several statutes, including the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act enforcement provisions, and, depending on the means, federal wire fraud. Document the attempt. File it with the FBI field office. They take it seriously. I filed that report with the Philadelphia FBI field office on Friday at 3 in the afternoon. The receipt came back at 3:17. By Friday evening, the case was assigned to a special agent named Whitaker, who wanted to know everything I had on the Ashfords. I told her. That night I went out to the barn to check on Atlas. She was standing at her stall door the way she does when she senses the house is tense. I put my hand on her nose. I told her, in a low voice, that we were 3 days from court. She breathed out, long and slow, and leaned against my shoulder. Bryony had one more move left. In retrospect, it was her worst. On Tuesday morning, 3 days before the Harrisburg hearing, she hired a different paving crew, under a different company name, and instructed them to quietly extend the asphalt another 40 feet, under cover of a scheduled landscaping day at Hunt Club Meadows. The instruction was given in writing, over email, which is a detail I want you to hold on to. Boone Callahan, who was watching the trail cameras overnight as he had promised, called me at 4:47 in the morning. Silas, there's a paving truck on your south pasture. I'm on my way. Don't you come down. I've got it. Boone, please do not. I'm not going to hurt anybody. I'm going to stand in front of the truck holding a phone and recording. That is all. Which is exactly what Boone did. A 76-year-old retired ranger in a canvas jacket, standing in the dirt in front of a 12-ton paving vehicle at 4:53 a.m., filming in 4K, while calmly reciting the federal statute under which the crew's work constituted a felony. The paving crew left. They left fast. They did not pour an additional yard. By 7 a.m., Boone had emailed me the footage, plus the full email chain between Bryony Ashford and the paving company, because the paving company's foreman, a man named Dale Usher, had handed Boone his phone on the spot and said, "Sir, I don't want any part of this. Everything's in here. Forward whatever you need." Boone had. He had also photographed Dale's CDL and handed the phone back with a firm handshake. I am telling you that story because I want you to remember, next time you are in a fight with a Karen, that there are more decent men than her in the world, and they usually show up before breakfast. On Wednesday afternoon, a silver Dodge sedan began tailing my truck. I noticed it halfway through a routine heritage inspection in Coatesville. The driver was a middle-aged man in a windbreaker, whose face I did not recognize. He stayed 3 cars behind me on Route 82 for 11 miles. I did not confront him. I drove home along my normal route. I pulled into Boone's driveway instead of mine and stopped. Boone stepped out onto his porch. The silver Dodge slowed, hesitated at the end of the drive, and then continued past. Boone wrote the plate down with a pencil on the back of an envelope. 12 minutes later, Boone, Trooper Delaney Fox, and I were at Boone's kitchen table. Trooper Fox ran the plate. The sedan was a leased vehicle registered to Ashford Real Estate Holdings. "Okay," Trooper Fox said, "we have solicitation of private surveillance of a state officer on a file in active litigation by a defendant. That's tampering. That's obstruction. That's a state and federal issue." She made 3 calls before her coffee was cold. Reese was at home that afternoon with Aunt Willa. She called me an hour later. "Silas, Reese is fine, but a car pulled into the driveway, stopped, looked at the house, and drove off. I got the plate. It was the same plate. I drove home at the speed limit exactly, parked, walked inside, and sat down on the kitchen floor beside Reese, who was doing a 1,500-piece puzzle of a thoroughbred racehorse. He looked at me. "Dad, you're shaking a little." "I am, Bud. Should I be scared?" "No, we have the sheriff, the state police, and the FBI on our side. The Ashfords just made everything 3 times bigger than they could handle." "Dad." "Yeah, I'd like to testify on Friday, if they'll let me." "Reese, you don't have to." "I know. I want to. I looked at my son, at his hair, which still stuck up in the back the way Naomi's did, at the piece of the horse puzzle in his hand, which was the ear. If Constance says yes, I told him, you can. The Dauphin County Courthouse in Harrisburg is a 5-story granite building with a bronze statue of William Penn out front, who looks, on a gray October morning, like a man who has seen this kind of day before. The hearing was set for 9:30. By 9 o'clock, the room was so full that overflow seating had been opened in an adjacent chamber with a closed-circuit feed. Reese and I arrived at 8:45. He was wearing the navy jacket his grandmother had bought him 3 years ago, slightly too small in the shoulders. His hair was combed. His folder, labeled "My Horse and My Trail" in careful block letters, was under his arm. Behind us came Constance Marlowe in a charcoal pantsuit. Behind Constance, Director Phoebe Arrington. Behind her, Trooper Delaney Fox, in dress uniform with the PSP Heritage Crimes insignia on her collar. Behind the trooper, NPS Special Agent Rebecca Lind, in her service greens with a federal shield. Behind Agent Lind, Dr. Ezra Pennington, with an archival crate. Behind Ezra, Miss Ada Fairborn, in a purple Sunday dress, on the arm of her grandson. Behind them, Boone Callahan, in a press jacket that I suspect he had not worn since 1994. Behind Boone, Dale Usher, the paving foreman, carrying his own phone records. Behind Dale, Pamela Quinn of the Daily Local News, with a press badge. Behind Pamela, the stringers from 3 other regional papers. Behind them, 73 members of the Chester County Equestrian Council, most in riding jackets, and, at the back, 29 descendants of documented Underground Railroad passengers from 3 states. Bryony Ashford was at the defense table in a cream blazer and a face that was no longer quite her own. Lionel Ashford sat behind her in a navy 3-piece, looking smaller than I had remembered. Their attorney was a woman I had not yet met, Ms. Halliday, from a White Shoe Philadelphia firm, whose jaw tightened at the sight of the state police uniform, the federal shield, and the descendants. Judge Ketchings called the hearing to order. Constance Marlowe stood. Over the next 90 minutes, without raising her voice once, she laid the record in front of the court the way a surgeon lays instruments on a tray. The 1,797 mile markers, photographed before and after, the 2004 federal listing, the 2007 Network to Freedom dossier, the 1849 Delphine Fairborn journal entry, the drone footage of the paving, the forged Fairborn signature, the VOIP call impersonating a parent, the silver Dodge plate, the paving contractor's sworn affidavit, Lionel's emails coordinating the project with his commercial real estate partner to increase traffic access to a strip mall he was quietly developing 2 miles south, the civil penalty, now at $650,000 and climbing, the restoration cost estimate, $480,000, the federal felony referral. Then she invited Miss Ada Fairborn to speak. Miss Ada walked up to the witness stand slowly, using a cane that had belonged to her mother. She did not look at Bryony. She looked instead at the back of the courtroom, at the 29 descendants, and at her own grandson. "My great-great-grandmother," she said, "walked that trail on a night in March of 1849, with my great-grandmother strapped to her chest. She did not know if she would live to see morning. She did see morning. She was met at the Whitmore farm by Ruth Whitmore's great-grandmother, who gave her a cup of broth. I am alive because that trail was alive. I will not be alive to see my own grandchildren read my name in a newspaper for losing that trail. I will be alive for the day we plant the stones back in the ground." The room did not breathe for about 11 seconds. Then my son walked to the witness stand. He read his essay, in full, in a steady voice. He cited 3 statutes by number. He looked at Bryony exactly once and said, "Mrs. Ashford, I am autistic. I memorize registration numbers because they help me feel safe. You destroyed the thing I memorized. You cannot unmemorize me." Judge Ketchings wiped her eyes. Then Constance read the total exposure. Restoration costs, $480,000. Civil penalties, now at $675,000 and climbing. Compensatory damages to the Whitmore estate, $250,000. Federal criminal referral to the U.S. Attorney for destruction of a Network to Freedom resource. State criminal referral for forgery, obstruction, impersonation. Lionel Ashford's emails referred to the DA's public corruption unit. Paving contractor's license suspended pending full review. Bryony made a sound. Ms. Halliday rose.
Your Honor, my clients would like to discuss settlement parameters, Judge Ketching said, quietly. Then you may discuss them with the Commonwealth. Court is in recess. I walked to Reese. I sat down beside him. He leaned his head against my shoulder, something he had not done since his mother's funeral. The Ashfords settled on a Wednesday afternoon, 2 weeks and 4 days after the hearing. Their homeowner's insurance, after reading the file, denied coverage on the grounds that willful destruction of a federally listed historic resource is not an insurable accident. Lionel's commercial real estate partner pulled out of the strip mall project. Lionel sold a Philadelphia condo at a loss to cover the first installment. The total, including civil penalty, restoration cost, compensatory damages, and reimbursement of state investigative expenses, was $2,140,000. The criminal side moved slower, the way the criminal side always moves. Bryony pleaded to 2 felonies, destruction of historic resources and forgery, received 18 months of supervised probation, 1,000 hours of community service, and a federal plea on the network to freedom charge that added a second tier of reporting requirements. Her community service is court-assigned to the Pennsylvania Historic Resource Inventory Project, where she is cataloging, by hand, the state's existing historic horse trails. She is, I am told, very careful with the paperwork. Lionel took the public corruption referral more seriously than his wife did. He accepted a negotiated plea that included a 10-year bar from public real estate development in the Commonwealth, restitution to the taxpayers of Chester County, and a $100,000 donation to the PA Abolition Society archives. Their house in Hunt Club Meadows went to short sale. They moved to Delaware. They did not leave a forwarding address. I did not spend the settlement on myself. I set aside Reese's college fund, because his grandmother would have, and because his mother would have. I paid Nolan Redding his fee, which was a fraction of what he was worth. I paid Boone Callahan back for the trail cameras and the overnight coffee. Then I took the rest to a meeting at Miss Ada Fairborn's kitchen table, where we built something I am going to be proud of for the rest of my life. The Whitmore Heritage Trail Trust. It does 4 things. It restores and maintains the trail with period-accurate stone and gravel, open to any non-motorized traveler who respects the ground. It operates a year-round interpretive program, co-designed with the Fairborn family and the Chester County Underground Railroad Preservation Society, with full signage telling the 1849 story. It endows an equestrian therapy program for neurodivergent children, modeled on what Reese and Atlas had built in silence for 9 years. And it funds a scholarship for young people of color pursuing careers in heritage preservation, named, at Miss Ada's request, the Delphine Fairborn Fellowship. The 7/17/97 mile markers were restored by a stonemason out of Lancaster named Joel Hayworth, who used period lime mortar and hand tools and refused to let me pay him more than cost. They now stand exactly where they stood in 1797, in 1849, and in my grandmother's color-coded index tab. On a cold, clear Saturday in November, we held the reopening ceremony. Miss Ada cut the ribbon with a pair of scissors her grandmother had used to sew quilts. Reese rode Atlas down the length of the restored trail, first, at his request, because he said he had waited long enough. Behind him came a procession of local kids on ponies from the therapy program. Behind the kids came Miss Ada in a wagon driven by her grandson. Behind the wagon walked 53 descendants of documented Underground Railroad passengers, carrying small, hand-painted signs with their ancestors' names. At the far end of the trail, at the 1,797-mile marker, Reese dismounted. He walked up to the marker. He placed his hand on the stone, flat, the way he had the day he saw the asphalt. Then he looked at me across the trail. Dad, the feeling of it is back. If this story has a lesson, it is that quiet preparation and honest record-keeping, practiced by ordinary, decent people across several generations, will outlast every cream blazer in the Republic. If you have a trail, a barn, a wall, or a story that your grandmother wrote down on a green-tabbed form, honor it. Research it tonight. And if you've got your own Karen story, drop it in the comments. I read every single one. Subscribe for next week's, where a bank vice president decides a widow's family orchard is in the way of his new drive-through, and learns what the Department of Agriculture can do in 48 hours. I'll see you there.
What made Bryony ask for blues wasn't the paving itself. It was her assumption that nobody on that quiet farm was paying attention. She mistook Silas's patient for absent. She mistook right silence for weakness. She mistook a horse trail for common ground and an underground railroad corridor for marketing opportunity. Every one of the assumptions turned into a sworn exhibit in open court. Silas's real advantage wasn't his job title. It was his grandmother, a woman who spent the last 15 years of her life entering a stone into a registry most people never knew existed. She built the paper trail 15 years before it was needed. She color-coded the tabs. She left her grandson the books, the mirror, and a red tax dossier that turned out to be, quite literally, worth $2 million and one restored piece of American memory. If you have a grandmother's box in your attic, open it this weekend. You might be holding the thing your family needs 20 years from now. Drop your own HOA story in the comments. I read everyone. Subscribe for next week, where a bank vice president decides a Windows family orchard is in the way of his new drive-thru, and learns what the Department of Agriculture can do in 48 hours. See you there.